All right, everybody, welcome back to Politically Plain. Today we are on Chapter 2 of One Dimensional Man by Herbert Marcuse. This chapter is called The Closing of the Political Universe. I know I did one a long time. Actually, I don't know how long it's been since I did Chapter 1, maybe 2 weeks. But Chapter 2, for those who read it, it's an intense chapter. It's actually It's straightforward, but he has a lot of details that he goes into with Chapter 2. So, for those who are new, remember this channel that I'm doing is all about just trying to make things as plain and simple as possible for people to understand tougher concepts, books. I just recently started doing this kind of like book series where I'll be reading random political books and trying to explain them, specifically ones that are more difficult, like this one. I almost wish I didn't start with this one because this one's kind of intense, but regardless, Chapter 2, The Closing of the Political Universe. Okay, if I had to put this chapter in like a couple sentences, literally this entire chapter is all about how the current system that we live, it's all about how the current system that we live in stops us from engaging in politics. And that's quite literally the entire chapter. And he goes into a few different subsections. So there's containment of social change, prospects of containment, and then the last one is the welfare and warfare state. And all of these subsections are him explaining how the political universe is being closed. And so just as another quick summary, he explains that the political universe is how we as humans make major social changes. And through politics, it's through politics that we make, we better our lives and make greater social changes for the betterment of the human race. And so he's saying that capitalism, or the system that we live with all the technological advancements and all these advancements in capitalism, it's slowly, turned off this political side in order to control us and make sure that there's no dissent. So, anyways, let's start. Also, okay, I should also say, I'm not going to be reading a lot from this chapter because, again, the way he writes can be really confusing. And this was a chapter where, as I was reading, I was like, there's almost nothing to, like, if I were to quote this chapter, I feel like I'd have to almost read the whole chapter. So I'm not going to read much. I'm actually going to literally read one thing at the end. And so it'll just be me explaining the chapter. So let's start with the first part of the chapter, the containment of social change. I'll probably switch here. Hopefully you can see it a little better. So containment of social change. So the point that Marcuse is making is that in order for the system that we live in, and when I say the system we live in, just think of literally the system that we're living in right now, this capitalist market, free economy, whatever you want to call it, the system we live in. What he is saying is, his argument for this subsection is that the system needs to ensure that social change is contained. So as he's been talking about in Chapter 1 like crazy, and throughout this whole thing, he's big on this idea that critical thinking, so the ability to critically think, to be able to look at a system or anything really and be able to critique it fundamentally and critique, potential problems. The system doesn't want you to do that. It's fine with some social change, obviously, but it's about containing it to ensure that we're not thinking outside of the box. And so the way that he says that the system does it is it contains it via consumerism in the media. So he argues that the system provides all these goods and all these advancements, technological advancements and goods, that the system makes it seem like there is no reason for there to be major social change because the system is providing everything that you could need. So, and that's via consumerism. So if you remember the false needs in the previous chapter, he's saying that these false needs are marketed and advertised to you, through media, that you want it and you should chase it. And this is like the new thing you want. So like iPhones, any kind of technology, laptops, whatever, it's being provided to you. So why would we engage in the political universe to make social change when, the quote unquote good life is already being provided to me by the system. And it's essentially, and you may ask yourself, like, well, if it is providing everything, like, what should we be critiquing? What should we be critically thinking about? Well, there's obviously plenty of economic inequalities, specifically in the United States, but with the system, there's plenty of, like poor resources for a lot of people within the United States. There's plenty of like safety nets that we don't have, universal health care. And a lot of his argument is that we have the means, the ability to provide for everybody the actual good life. It's just a matter of we're utilizing technology to essentially control people. We're allowing technology to evolve to control and ensure people aren't, engaging in politics and social change, thinking differently about the system. So that's really the entire first part of the first subsection of this chapter. Is all about how the system contains social change. And really it's all about, it utilizes consumerism, us consuming things and wanting the next and greatest, gadget, whatever it may be, and the media to tell us like, no, everything is good. Even if there are some bad things, we're being provided everything that you could need. You can just, pull yourself up by the bootstraps and just get to work and you can get it. That's the containment of social change. Don't think of anything other than working. There is no not working, right? You have to work, whatever it may be. So that's containment of social change. With regards to closing of the political universe, there is no need to engage in politics, right? Because everything's provided. Why would you engage in politics to make changes? So, okay, so then the second part is prospects of containment. Okay, so prospects of containment. This is a direct, again, one of my favorite, probably my favorite of the three, but a direct tie from the containment of social change. So what he talks about and argues in this subsection is essentially that, again, he goes into deep details about how, philosophers like Plato and Rousseau and a lot of ancient political philosophers, their whole point was that, and especially Plato, was that people should be educated to the fullest in politics, because politics is the reason that societies advance at the rate that they do, specifically socially. And so he brings up Plato and Rousseau as like these people who are like, look at Plato and Rousseau and look at how they have argued critical thinking is so important. Like critical thinking is all about engaging in politics and envisioning a better social world. And so he brings them up as almost essentially as like a backbone to his argument of where are his ideas coming from. And he then talks about integration a little bit, about how, okay, so how have we gone off the path of what Plato and Rousseau envisioned? Well, it's because that, again, back to consumerism and media, we as the people have been integrated into this system, and the system integrates us into it so well that we put our priority on the system itself and not, critical thinking, not social change, not politics, not, not thinking of a better world. More, we think instead of like, okay, how can I work more efficiently? How can I make more money efficiently? How can I create a product more efficiently? And again, think of how integrated you are into the system, right? You work for the system, you're paid by the system, you buy things from the system provides the means to do all this. So like, it's not that he in a way is trying to like tell you how hard it is to acknowledge this, right? You're so integrated that you are essentially becoming the system. And that's what he kind of talks about in the previous chapter, right? Is it's so difficult to explain this to people because, people are going to immediately have kind of a bad reaction to it. Like a almost an angry or like weird reaction to it. And it's simply because we've been integrated into it to the point where we almost feel like we are one with the system. You know, that's why everybody is so, and he's arguing like, this is why people are so at peace with the system. You know, this is the good life. This is what we're chasing, is this system. And it's because they've been integrated so much. And again, this just all ties back into like, if that is how you feel, then it makes sense. Like you don't care that social change is being contained. That's why people don't want social change, because they feel like you're so integrated and you feel like the system provides so many good things. You can't see past the good and see the bad and critically think about like, okay, like what is the system really doing to us, right? And that's what he's talking about in this kind of section is he's almost alluding to that, you know, kind of taking from chapter 1 a little bit. Like we are so integrated that, and a lot of people are so integrated that they can't see, like this almost doesn't make sense to them because they feel like the system is already so good. What he's saying is that's a dangerous road to be on with regard to feeling like there can't be any bad, or the bad is just part of the system. We can't do anything about it or whatnot. And so, as I kind of talked about before, the system we live puts a priority on efficiency at the expense of justice and equality, which is really what Plato and Rousseau talk about in like any of their books, and their philosophy is through the political universe, you can make major social changes, but that is to obtain greater justice and equality. And so what the system does is it puts the priority on efficiency. So efficiency of, you know, profit making, efficiency of product making, efficiency of, you know, goods and services to the people, which to a certain point can be good, which is what we'll get into in the welfare and warfare state. But hopefully that makes sense with those two. I think I've kind of gone over that well enough. So let's go over to the welfare and warfare state. This is where I will read at the end of this, but the welfare and warfare state is Marcuse essentially arguing like, okay, let's say you as someone who's new to reading this, you just take this, you know, at face value and say, okay, I agree. Well, so then the question is, well, if this is true, like, why haven't people, like, why would we not, why is there no, like, revolts or, like, rebellions, right? And so this is where he's like, well, here's the example of, like, how it does such a great job of making people feel like there is nothing wrong, right? And he brings up the welfare and warfare state. So the welfare state is the ability for the system to provide essentially like social programs for people that make people feel like, oh, see, the system is working. The system is providing these various social... Okay, so a social program like really any welfare, social security, you know, minimum wage. Let's see, what else does he touch on? Medicaid and Medicare, stuff like that. He even hits on like universal health care, but that's something the U.S. doesn't have, so I don't really want to bring it up. But things like that, those are things that the system provides that make people feel like, oh, see, it really is working for us. And then to keep us unified, because that could be divisive. People could be divided on like, should we be providing like, oh, we don't, well, to unify the people, then there's the warfare state. So, and this is a perfect example for the U.S. He talks about how countries will start spending more on, you know, their military budgets and their defense, and, you know, making it an us versus them instead of a, you know, internal like people turning against each other. There will be greater investment into we need to invest because we are all one. It's an us versus them. And so he talks about this like warfare state of, it's actually beneficial for there to be warfare in the world And he kind of alludes to like creating wars, but he doesn't come out right out and say it. But what he says is there's a benefit to countries investing in war because it creates a sense of unity within countries that utilize the system in really every country. So in the U.S., it's like, let's spend a lot on the military, invest in war, right? Because then it creates a sense of unity with our people of like, yeah, we're all one. We're one with this country. It's almost like a nationalism thing. But that helps to, again, it goes back to integration, right? Like that helps to integrate us and control how we see our system. And again, it goes all the way back to closing the political universe and containing social change. Why would we want to change the system and invest or, invest or engage in politics when we are all one? We're together in this war machine, whatever you want to call it. And, this war machine provides us, welfare and different social programs that help us. Like, there is no reason to engage in this and to change and to engage in social change. And that's kind of where he goes with this, as like two examples of how the system contains us, controls us. And he talks a little bit about how, like, if this really is what people describe as democracy, then democracy is the greatest domination tool or system. Is through democracy is how you can dominate and control people. And so that's that. And then he gets into this capitalism versus communism thing. And I think a lot of people will say, Marcuse is clearly not a communist because at the very end, he critiques both. What he says with capitalism versus communism is he's like, both of these systems are control systems. Capitalism utilizes efficiency and the state to control the people. Communism does the exact same thing. Communism is a state system that, essentially uses the welfare part of this to control the people. And so I'll just read, this is literally the last paragraph of the chapter. And this is what he's saying. And he's talking about capitalism and communism. He says, the fateful interdependence of the only two sovereign social systems in the contemporary world is expressive of the fact that the conflict between progress and politics, between man and his masters, has become total. When capitalism meets the challenge of communism, it meets its own capabilities. Spectacular development of all productive forces after the subordination of the private interests in profitability which arrests such development. When communism meets the challenge of capitalism, it too meets its own capabilities, spectacular comforts, liberties, and alleviation of the burden of life. Both systems have these capabilities distorted beyond recognition, and in both cases, the reason in the last analysis is the same. The struggle against a form of life which would dissolve the basis for domination. So what he's saying, again, is that both of these systems are made, or I guess really, I wouldn't even say made. They're used the wrong way. They're kind of like almost hijacked to become a system that dominates and controls people. And what he's saying is, when they meet each other, they kind of meet their own like capabilities. So like when capitalism runs into communism, it's like people immediately want to turn away because of what he's laid out. But really, it just meets its own capabilities and its own like, oh, this is the fix. And same with communism. When a communism system is implemented and it hits capitalism, people of the communist system might think like, oh, this is bad. And honestly, the funniest part about this is if you're in a capitalist system, living in a capitalist system, and the idea of communism comes up, you're going to repulse it and you're going to like push it away because of all these reasons. So like consumerism in the media is telling you communism is bad. Why would we change from capitalism? Because it provides all of these goods and like products. I mean, it's so efficient. And then the funniest part is if you're in a communist system, so let's say hypothetically we all lived in a communist system right now, and we were talking about capitalism, and I was talking about, certain things of capitalism. Well, you as the would you even be a communist, I guess, but you within the system would look at me and be like, well, no, it's like, we have just perfect justice and equality. And it's like, well, yeah, you're back to your mind has been closed. The political universe has been closed in the communist system. And your mind, you can no longer critically think because of media, probably not consumerism, but more because media and like you're being provided everything, that the efficiency is now lacked. And that's what he's talking about, is when they meet each other, the opposite ends of the spectrum are essentially the thing missing from your system that would make the system even better. And so in both systems, again, his point of bringing up capitalism and communism is that he's not in favor of either, because both are systems of domination and control when they're implemented the wrong way. Essentially what he is in favor of is, I would say he's essentially interested in like both of these, like a combination of these, but they have to be implemented the correct way. And people have to understand that they need to be implemented for the benefit of humanity. And I think he might also say that the implementation of capitalism in this like advanced technological society that we live in now probably did at some point have it had the hopes to be that, but it's now being used the wrong way. So technology isn't being used to help humanity. It's being used to make capitalism more efficient. And so that's his critique of capitalism in this sense. I think another thing that people need to understand is, I think some people are like, well, why are we talking so much about capitalism? Like, why are we critiquing capitalism when communism is so much worse? Communism is awful. Okay, we're talking about it because we live in a capitalist society. Okay, it's kind of like the whole president thing. It's like, well, why are people talking so bad about Joe Biden right now? Why? And it's like, well, it's because he's the president right now. And then people talk bad about Trump. It's like, well, Biden did something so much worse. Or why are we talking bad about Trump? It's like, well, because Trump's the president right now. It's not Joe Biden. Like, I don't care about Joe Biden anymore, right? And so that's the answer. That's really the easiest answer to the question of like, why are we always critiquing capitalism? Because that's the point. Because we live in a capitalist system, like, why shouldn't we critique it? Like, what's the problem with critiquing it? I mean, saying that is exactly what Marcuse is talking about in this chapter, is like, by saying that, you are closing the political universe. And something that Plato and Rousseau like warned against was when people stop talking about politics and engaging in the political universe and thinking critically, that's when societies fail. Is actually quite literally exactly what Plato said. When people stop educating themselves and thinking critically, that's when societies fail. And I think Marcuse has kind of seen that road. Again, he wrote this however many years ago in the 1900s. I think it was the 60s, but regardless, he foresaw us going down that path where we're so integrated into the capitalist system that this is just closed off. And the only thing that can happen is a failure of the system. And so that's kind of where we're at with chapter 2, the closing of the political universe. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to go over. I don't think so. Hopefully that made sense. I'll have to rewatch this and see how I did, but anyway, I think that's the end of chapter 2. Again, really tough read. I will say that was way tougher than chapter 1 in my opinion, but as I like skimmed over it a few times, I realized it was a lot more of a Marcuse like getting into the weeds of this and I don't want to like downplay Marcuse at all, because like it's helpful, but a lot of what he's talking about is like the details, the weeds, like getting really nitty gritty with this closing the political universe. And And it's really a lot more simple than you think as you read. So hopefully this made sense of what he's talking about. Again, really just a big tie from chapter 1. And specifically now he's just applying what he talked about in chapter 1 to politics and social change. So anyway, leave a comment. Let me know what you think. If you had any different ideas, you probably had better ideas and a better takeaway. So let me know your takeaway. Let me know if you have any questions about chapter 3 that I can answer, because I'll do chapter 3 hopefully in the next week. I don't know how long 3 is. Most likely, if I'm remembering right, it just gets more and more intense. So we'll see how we do. Have a good day.